the trade fight that's going on right now is having an impact. We all know that. We all knew that was going to happen. A lot of the farmers I talked to throughout the Central Valley always say the same thing. We've had problems with trade for years. It's something we've always wanted addressed. This president has taken a totally different approach to it, and this tariff standoff that's going on, it's painful. I mean, people are starting to see a difference. Markets are having an impact, and so farmers are weathering through the storm. They're all coming up with different ways of trying to manage through it. And so the administration came out with this new aid program that's coming out. We reached out to the USDA. We're trying to be as involved as we possibly can in trying to direct that so that it's actually helpful, because a lot of times government gives out dollars, not always as helpful as we'd like. And sometimes they don't really understand how to best implement that so it has the most positive impact for as little money as possible on the marketplace. So when the Secretary decided to come to California, we obviously would like him to hear from our farmers themselves, and so he's going to have opportunity to do so today.
Absolutely. And do you know of any local farmers that are getting aid right now, or using aid, or reaching out to you asking for aid?
Well, most farmers will say the exact same thing. Aid is fine, and if the program is set up and it makes sense, they'll apply for it, but at the end of the day, they just want a good marketplace. And having a marketplace to deliver their product and having good, fair trade is the direction they prefer. As far as those dollars, they have not been pushed out yet. We're looking at early September before we actually get the details on how that's going to happen. We're going to try to have an impact on that today with our farmers and the Secretary of Ag, but it's early September before that's even available to farmers.
Now, obviously, you were a dairy farmer yourself, and unfortunately had a sad situation with that. Would you accept aid from the president?
Well, as far as, again, when you put that out to farmers, depending on the market, and especially when as competitive as it is, and all this, everything that goes on in our industry, obviously California is a struggle because of our water side and because of our regulatory side, and then now the market side is struggling. When that goes out, as competitive as we are, trying to basically keep our heads above water, waiting for the next opportunity to pay the bills, and that's all of agriculture, you would almost, I mean, if you didn't take whatever dollars are out there, your neighbors were taking it, and so you're at a competitive disadvantage. And so what's out there, you should be a part of, and if it's not out there, no one's a part of. But at the end of the day, yes, you are competing with one another, fighting for market, fighting for product, even if it's your input costs or your cost of, or your profits from your product leaving. You want to make sure that you're as competitive as possible, and so you do everything you possibly can to be competitive.
Absolutely. And President Trump, obviously, he kind of spars with our governor here in California, but does he, I'm sure he realizes that the Central Valley specifically is such a huge agricultural pocket for our nation. Do you think, I guess, Washington has seen the value here in Bakersfield, Fresno, Visalia, and what we do for the nation in terms of food?
So I think the president himself gets it, because he's actually been to the Central Valley. The vice president has been to the Central Valley, and now the secretary is on his second.
We just had Ivanka come.
Yes, Ivanka's
awesome.
been here not too long ago, and the secretary himself has been here. So he gets it, making sure that it's heard. Sometimes we struggle with Sacramento, though, because Sacramento is such a big state, 40 million people, and when you look at all the industries that provide, that pay the tax revenue, I mean, you're competing with the Googles and the Facebooks of the world, the whole Silicon Valley, and then you get into medical devices and pharmaceutical companies in Hollywood. And then California agriculture seems to kind of be pushed under the rug a little bit in Sacramento, and so that's one of the fights that we do struggle with. Washington gets it, but there's agriculture all over across the nation. Our agriculture here in the Central Valley just tends to be crops that you can't really grow anywhere else. We've got a climate, we've got an area that can grow things that just we don't have the ability to grow anywhere else. Tend to be higher value crops, and something that everyone enjoys on their salad or everyone enjoys on their plate. It's not just the corn and soybeans that you see in other parts of America.
Absolutely. Well, is there anything else, I guess, now that you're bringing the secretary here today, that you want people to know that can benefit this area, or farmers are watching at home?
Well, this one's going to be geared, at least the conversations, unless the farmers decide to take it in other routes. I expect it to be mostly around trade. It'll be a little bit about the program that they're looking at rolling out in early September, and then it'll also be about ag immigration, ag visas, and the fight that we just had in Washington, the role that California agriculture plays in that, and hopefully a road forward and on trying to get some actual solutions there.
Yeah, and you mentioned immigration. That brings me to my next point. Have the families all been reunited? How, I mean, you have a lot of part in the game of immigration. How's everything going?
So there are still quite a few kids out there that have not been reunited. I think the official number is a little over 300. 290, almost 99 of them have had communications with the parents so that they're going to work on reuniting. The judge that's overseeing the case has actually been very impressed with the way administration is handling that. I was down at the border just last week talking to our Border Patrol agents and actually watching through the process while I was in one of the detention facilities or one of the facilities where they move folks through. There was a child there that was unaccompanied. There was another cell there that had a couple families in there. So it looked what it looked like, a mother and some children. Obviously, they're still trying to figure out who the folks were and making sure that they were actually related to one another. But it is a complicated fight because they never really know. Someone shows up to the border. A lot of times they purposely don't have documentation just because they don't want to have a easy path forward to being sent back to a country. So sometimes they try to make it a little more complicated. And it makes the job of our government much more difficult.
And obviously, you are passionate about immigration. You want those rights for people, but you're a member of the Republican Party too and see the benefit of doing it safely. What was it like for you going down to the border? And you got to see both sides. You saw in that detention camp, you saw what the border security has to put up with. I guess what's your takeaway that you might bring back to Washington now?
Well, the takeaway is obviously we're fighting a really difficult battle. There are decent people who are trying to look for a better life, and then there are in the detention facility. I did see people who were part of gangs, had criminal records. They were bad people, and so the fight that we get into in Washington is one side will act like everyone is perfect and innocent and all these really wholesome family folks trying to come looking for a better life. The other side will act like they're all gangbangers. And the reality is it's not, it's a little bit of both. There is a lot of decent people, but there's also a lot going on the border. As far as people trying to bring in drugs through one of the port of entries where 3,500 semis are coming through every single day moving product into the U.S., and there are a lot of folks trying to do us harm by bringing in drugs is the main thing. Marijuana, which surprised me after we legalized marijuana in California, they still bring in more than we've ever brought in the past. Cocaine, meth, all different products are trying to be snuck in. And that's one of the most difficult parts of this is when I went down in that tunnel was designed specifically for moving drugs. Occasionally you hear of high-value targets, you'll hear of people from the Middle East trying to sneak in, and that's all been out there as well. But it's a complicated fight down there, and trying to get through all the smoke in this, because there is a lot of things that are just being said that just aren't true, or a lot of focus on things that just really aren't the reality. And make sure we get to the actual solution and solve it for once and for all.
Now, a couple months ago, that immigration bill unfortunately didn't pass. I don't know, do you think you'll have a new strategy, I guess, going back to Washington, and kind of, are you hoping to start up a new bill to get through?
So there's a case that we've been kind of watching for a while. When President Trump announced that he was going to push back on DACA, but he gave that period of time, it was pretty much holding off a court case. There's a attorney general out of Texas that is pushing a case to challenge DACA and challenge it in court. If that makes it to the federal or to the Supreme Court, there's a decent chance that a Supreme Court could actually eliminate DACA, and all those kids, 600,000, 700,000 of them across the United States, could have their status eliminated immediately. And so that was why President Trump came in with his proposal for the 6 months, and then he had his proposal to solve it with a compromise of border security plus also path to citizenship for these kids. If that court case comes to fruition and they eliminate DACA for all these kids, it's going to put a lot more pressure on us getting something done much quicker. And I don't like Washington moving fast when it's policy that affects so many people, but at the end of the day, this is probably what we're going to be forced into, and if that happens, we might see something in the fall. If the court case goes nowhere, that might push us into the next election cycle.